it has been a glorious 3 days of learning, and it is so nice to see so many of you still here because we've got some important voices to listen to in the next little bit. And I want to just jump right in because our time is precious and our time is super limited on this. So we're going to spend some time bringing it all together. The last 2.5 days, we've been learning about how to assist our transfer students, but we've been learning from one another as professionals. We've had a few sprinklings of student feedback here and there, but this is our time to really listen to what I consider to be the most important people in the room. So, let's begin. I'm going to ask each of you to please give us a sense of who you are. Tell us who you are, what your major is. Let us know where you currently are, where you transferred from, and then we'll launch into our questions. All right?
Cool. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Giovanni Francis. I transferred from Wake Tech of Raleigh. I am currently an undergrad student at Appalachian State in Boone, North Carolina. I currently study industrial design with concentration in product design. I guess a little interesting thing about me, ever since I've been in Boone, I've really enjoyed snowboarding and hiking, and I definitely recommend if you've never been there to go.
The number of times we've heard a pitch for us to go to Boone is crazy. Jay, what do you like about just go to Boone? What was your favorite Boone? So my name is Bianca Hill. I go by B. I started at Carnegie Mellon in Pittsburgh, went to a community college in Dallas, and then transferred to Baylor, which is why I graduated in December, and I am now an admissions counselor at Baylor.
My name is Jennifer Hernandez. I am a senior in my last semester at the University of Illinois at Chicago, or UIC. Thank you. It's been a wild ride, and I am very ready. Not that I don't love being an undergrad, but I transferred from Harper College in Palatine, Illinois, which I really loved, and it was like living home for me. And I'm an English major, but I intend to go into public policy with a focus in education policy, so that's kind of why I'm here. And that's a little about me.
Hi, everyone. My name is Taylor Smith. I am originally from Montclair, New Jersey. I used to... Oh, okay. Hey, what's up? So I used to attend American University in Washington, D.C., where I specialize in international relations with a focus on peace, global security, and conflict resolution. I transferred out of there after 2 years, and I now attend Spelman College here in Atlanta, Georgia, where I still... Oh, yeah. Okay, cool. So I'm still doing international studies, but I've really found myself pulled to human resources as of late. So I've worked for Johnson & Johnson. I'm currently working at Habitat for Humanity in their HR department, and I guess I'll just wait and see where that takes me when I graduate next year.
Great. What a good crew, right? Taylor, since you have the microphone in your hand, I'm going to ask you to start with this. At what point, when you were at American University, did you know you wanted to transfer?
Is it weird if I say the first day that I got there?
Not at all.
So they had a welcome week type activity. So there were lots of different things going on for students to meet each other and get acclimated to campus as first years. So it was only freshmen that were allowed on campus during that week. And I guess while I was there, I just never felt like it clicked for me. I never felt that I was a part of that student body. I never felt like I was really integrated with those folks. So I could tell that I wasn't comfortable from the very first moment I stepped on campus, but it wasn't until my parents really pushed me to make a change, to make myself happier, that I decided that I was going to transfer.
Got it. So it almost took some intervention to help you realize that, yes, it's okay to say I'm not really digging it here.
I'm a little bit of a perfectionist, so it bothers me to turn around and say I think I made a mistake. My parents were really influential in just being like, hey, that's okay. We can send you somewhere else. No worries. It's not a big deal. We want you to be happy. So they were the big push for me, definitely.
Thanks.
Speaking of perfectionism, the idea of starting my college career at a community college was really heartbreaking at first because I had always anticipated going to a four-year institution, but as a first-gen student, I didn't really know how to make that happen. And my parents, as it turns out, knew even less than I did. And so they were asking me all of the questions that I was supposed to ask the college counselors, and as a high-achieving student, I didn't want to ask questions because you're supposed to know everything, which I didn't. So I ended up at community college, but I really loved it there. So I finished out my associates, and I had always anticipated transferring, but I didn't know where to, and I wish that I had known that going in so that I could sort of make that path to another institution. but I always knew that I wanted to transfer anyway somewhere else.
I have my own. I knew I was similar to Taylor. I knew pretty quickly that I didn't want to be at my first school, but I'm also a first gen, and so I was like, well, I can't be the first one to go to college and the first one to drop out of college. It's not a very good reputation. And so I thought I could stick it out, and I thought, if you just stick with it, you'll feel at home. Just kind of give it some time. And I absolutely did not. And the longer I stayed, by the time we got to October, I was like, man, this is not the place for me. And so my second year, while I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do and what exactly I needed in a school and in a community that was going to help me academically in any other way, that's when I went to community college. And that was wonderful for me because it was the first time that I was really exposed to learning, I think, outside of the classroom, within the classroom, if that makes sense, because it's such a diverse place, and it's beautiful in that you have class. I was working full time while going to school that year, and so I took primarily evening classes. So we had people who retired and just wanted to take classes for fun, and mothers who had their kids in the back because they didn't have somewhere else to keep their kids, and the kid who doesn't really want to go to school, but their parents want them to go to school, and they're 17, so they're just kind of in the class and they're not really paying attention. A little bit of everything, and so I knew that I wanted to transfer eventually, but I didn't know where, and then I ended up at Baylor.
So originally, my transfer experience where I started, I originally went to a community college after high school because I wasn't sure exactly what I wanted to do in my life. And I think the moment that really hit me that I should transfer was during February. I was in a position where I felt as if I wasn't in a good spot in my life, and I wanted to take opportunities that were offered to me. So I attended a career development test, and they recommended that my major at App State would be a very good fit for me. And I said that something that I always tell all transfer students as a transfer mentor is that any opportunity that's given to you, you should take advantage of it. And then for me, I'm a very opportunistic person, and I felt that if I'm in a part in my life where I'm not very happy with it, I'm going to do something about it. So I chose that after one semester at Wake Tech, I said that I'm just going to transfer, I'm going to go somewhere, and now where I'm at, I'm very happy with it, and I'm very successful, and the people that I work with it's been very influential who I am as a person, because I have developed and grown since that day at Wake Tech to where I am right now. And I feel as if that it's a common myth that transfer students are not very hardworking, and I'm a perfect example of that. We are very hardworking people. Mm-hmm. It really shook me when we were reading the gallery about that, and it's hurt because the fact that for me, knowing that after one semester I wanted to transfer is a testimony that we as transfer students are very hardworking, very opportunistic. We just want to succeed, and I think that was the moment that I really learned that.
You guys are really representative of all of the transfer students that we see across our country and their different pathways. You have personal commonalities, but your pathways have been very different. What would you say as you were looking for information about transferring? Where did you go? Once you realized, okay, it's okay for me to transfer, I really do need to be looking at other opportunities, where did you seek out that information, and from whom did you seek out that information? Bianca, you want to start? I'm sorry.
So my first time I transferred, I decided the night before we were supposed to. My mom is checking out right now, so she's not here. But oh, there she is, Miss Emma, my hero. There she is. The night before I was supposed to go back my second year, she was like, "Are you gonna pack? Because you haven't." So there's this thing. No. And so there was a lot of really quick. Look online, Google things, I don't know, go find a pamphlet on the sidewalk, I don't know, do something. That year, so when I transferred to Baylor, there was a little bit more of an actual process and looking things up. So a lot of my process was online just because I wasn't going to go somewhere that was near home. So for me, we have Joe Oliver, who's Office of One, kind of runs the show, is amazing at Baylor. And so I found his name, and I was like, well, this is the only person that says transfer on it, so I guess I'm just going to call him. And I did, and I think I just had one question. When you're like, oh, I just have one question, and then you're 3 hours into a conversation, and you're so for me, it was Joe. He if he didn't know the answer to something, he knew the person who knew the answer, and sent me an email or two with like 5,000 links, and I was like, this is where you go to fill this out. This is where you go to get this done. This is where you do this and that. So for me, it was an online search and finding that person on my campus who was the transfer person, or or for other campuses that have larger offices, finding the office and then just saying, here I am, please help.
Thank you.
Internet is, so I know probably none of you are like web developers, but if you know any, please talk to them. Just talk and ask because some of the websites are more accessible than others and make more sense than others and can't be navigated sometimes, especially by transfers. It's like, I want to come to your institution, and you're like, admit me, and they're like, hello, freshman, and you're like, oh, okay, never mind. Or they say transfer, and then it's like transfer resources, and it's like, this webpage cannot be found. Like, okay. But other than that, because I didn't know where I wanted to transfer to, most of my resources were at the community college level, and so I found a lot of support. There was a presentation on speech team. There's a lot of speech coaches who were very helpful because they knew me the best and they could help me the best. I didn't really know my advisors at the community college, so it was more like faculty and like people that I knew. There were like faculty who at office hours would go, what's next for you? And that showed me that they were interested in me and that I could maybe trust them and start that conversation and that ball rolling, even if it was just like a half-hour meeting, and I could take that information with me and then go to the internet after.
I don't want to be redundant. Mine was all on
Great.
Google as well.
Anything else you want to add, Jay?
So for my story actually started at my community college. We have this thing called a success coach, and even to this day, like, I'm very thankful for Saria Arts that she's not here, but she really influenced me. When I was in a moment where I really wanted to transfer, she really got me connected to information online. And then we have my faculty member at App State called Jane Dowdy. She's actually not here today. Jane was the person that really got me connected. She said, okay, this is what we do, this is how we do it. And that she gave me information, got me connected to other people. For example, in my department, my industrial design department, and I was able to communicate with them, and they gave me an idea of what information I could do. And because of that, I just took a trip one day to Boone, and I was able to really see how it is. And I think, like, for me, I'm not really I don't want to look online for information. I'm more of a peer-to-peer connection type information, because I really want to see what does the faculty think and what kind of information can you give me. Because you could just read something online, and that's fine. But when you have an interaction with a person, you engage with a conversation, I think it's a lot better that way.
So for you, it was really critical that staff at your current institution had connections to this institution where you were hoping to go,
Yes.
and accurate information about opportunities, programs, et cetera, at that campus.
Yeah, because for me, I wanted more of a human interaction. I want to see what's the emotional part about it. Because if you just have a screen and the like words on the screen, that's fine. It's like a computerized. But I think for students, it's very important to see the type of connection you could have. And I think it's very important for you to know, as faculty, to have a connection with them so you could better understand what they're going through.
Thank you. Where were some of the hiccups that you all experienced? You decided to transfer, you were moving into your new institution. During that transition or shortly thereafter, getting on that campus or to a new institution, what were some of the challenges, hiccups, different things you experienced?
I'll go first. So, as I mentioned, I currently attend Spelman College, and they take about 50 transfer students a year, and we only make up about 5% of the total population on Spelman's campus, so they have almost no transfer-dedicated programming or resources set out for us. So my experience applying there and transferring there was very procedural. I didn't really have a point of contact. I didn't really have any help getting my credits transferred or anything like that. I was just kind of calling and harassing the registrars, like, will you take this or no? I have the syllabi, let's do it. So I guess I say that to say there were a lot of different hiccups and a lot of places that we've now identified as areas of improvement, is what we're going to call them, so that we can try to make the intake process better for our students. But I think at this period in time, it's just really impersonal. There isn't a lot of contact with people who know what the transfer experience is like, so there was no such thing as a transfer mentor or someone to help you out through that process. So I say all that to say we're definitely working on improving that with my help and with what we're going to take from this conference this past week.
Great. And Spelman's not alone. We happen to say that institution's name, but I suspect that there are some situations across the country that would mirror that.
For mine, my school's a lot bigger than Spelman, but we have more of the policy work done. So there's a statewide articulation agreement, at least from the 2-year to the 4-year, and there's ostensibly a transfer office in the back of the registrar. There's a transfer orientation session, but a lot of these resources, the actual implementation of the policy has not been fulfilled, at least to me and to a lot of other students that I know. So there's a transfer orientation, but it's not really geared towards transfer. It's mostly just all of the transfers show up to orientation at the same time. And because it's so big, there's so many of us, and you kind of don't know anyone, and then you go home at the end. That's it. The transfer resource office is only for articulation issues or for at the point of transfer. It's very transactional, and so I only found them after orientation, after everything was pretty much done. And the impression that I got was, we can't really help you anymore. So despite having those things sort of built in, there was a perception that transfer students had already been dealt with at the institution, but as far as I was concerned and a lot of students that I was meeting with, we hadn't been.
So everyone talks about losing credits and all that, and I knew that mine was going to be messy because I started at a private school and then went to community college and then was going back to private, and I just knew that it was going to be messy. Bless you. And then I was changing my major, and so I was like, this is just going to be a wreck, and it was. But I think the biggest challenge I didn't expect to have, because I was going to a school that I knew had a lot of school spirit, that had a lot of Baylor has a ton of big school kinds of resources, and it feels small because of the community. That's just the culture of care and community that's there. So I wasn't anticipating not feeling like I fit in at all, and that's what I felt a lot of my first whole year. I didn't feel like I belonged until my second year, and I enjoyed being there, so that's why I stayed. But I think feeling I think you kind of touched on it, but having resources that are dedicated just for transfers, or at least someone saying this is not necessarily just for transfers, but transfers are just as welcome as freshmen or any other student to participate in these things, and here's how you can do it, would have been so much more helpful than just kind of being thrown in. And I'm thankful that I had a lot of community, and I was living in a living learning center with other transfers, and so I had all of that. But having dedicated staff and having upperclassmen to say, here's how you do these things and how you become part of this culture, more than just kind of being here, I think it was part of my biggest challenge.
So I'm not so sure exactly what to say because I feel as if my transition was very smooth. Do you want me to go into detail?
You're fine.
So for me, at our school, Appalachian State, we actually have a dedicated office for transfer students. So as soon as I was there, we had a transfer tour, transfer orientation. I actually live in a transfer ROC dorm where it's just all transfer students, where a lot of my good friends to this day, where I call them 3 o'clock in the morning, I'm like, hey, do you want to get some lunch or get dinner tomorrow morning? We had that conversation. Yeah. I feel as if I think what I've learned at this conference, I've been taking that for granted, is not that many schools actually offer that, and it really hurts me because I feel as if this is normal, but it's not. Having this type of opportunity, all my faculty members here, I'm very proud of them, and they support me to this day. They support me from when I was there. They're going to support me when I graduate, and it just really bothers me to know that there's other transfer students out there that's not offer the same opportunity, and it's heartbreaking.
So when you're talking, it's that balance, because you're new to that campus and you need information, so you need dedicated resources. And sometimes as professionals, we give you credit for your experience, and then we say, but they've done college, so they don't need specific examples of how to do things. But we do, right? And it's not that you're not talented, and it's not that you don't know how to be a college student. You just don't know how to do it there. So let's think about the folks in this room. What advice would you give them, beyond what you've already shared so far, in order to improve transfer culture, transfer services, student transfer success on their campuses? What would you encourage them to do?
Okay. I think getting students who are transfer students who are returning to work with new transfer students, that makes sense, is really key, because someone said this last night, and it really resonated with me, but having a leader who looks like you is so much more meaningful than having somebody who's kind of preaching at you. And they can be all great things that come from the best place, but having somebody who's in it with you while you're doing it is so important. So somehow finding a way to, formal or informal, have upperclassmen transfers engaging with new incoming transfers is probably, I think, the best thing that I can suggest.
I think I'm going to echo some of the sentiments that you just expressed in just saying that visibility, I think, is really, really important. And so when you're on campus, you want to feel like it's okay for me to be here, I belong here. And so that's being inclusive in language. When you're greeting the class of 20 whatever, it's important to also say, and our transfer students and our adult learners and whoever else, to make sure that we're being inclusive in the way that we speak to each other, to make sure that your institutional literature is the same way, that you are posting pictures of people that are all different ranges and types of students. I think visibility is something that's really, really important to make folks feel like they belong on their campus, and that's a place that they can feel safe and comfortable to explore their education and what they want to do with themselves.
For me, there's a lot of resources on campus that I think go underused, and I know a lot of folks have talked about ways to connect students with resources, and I find that to be very important. Like, my institution has a lot of, different associations for, students of different ethnicities or of different backgrounds, and maybe they don't target certain ones that we would all like to see, but the fact that those are out there and are, like, I've been told, like, oh, you don't see a lot of people in this office, so I'm glad you're here, which is a really great thing to hear, but what if I was one of those students who didn't show up? And is there a better way of trying to connect students, whether it's through email or through orientation, or one-on-one through panel sessions, kind of like this, where they're allowed to ask questions that they want to ask and figure out, like, okay, so there's this person, not like this office. Like, I came into my experience with a lot of anxiety and a lot of socially based anxiety. So the thought of going to a strange office with strange adults in it at a strange institution, I'm lucky that I ended up doing any of that. And the only reason I did is because I knew that I needed to, and I knew that I wouldn't make it to where I wanted to be without doing it. But a lot of students, they don't know the value of those offices yet, and to show them the exact value of what they're getting, I think, would incentivize them to actually go and talk to you guys.
I think for me, the most important thing is empathy, having a connection with the students. I guess a perfect example of that, when I first came to this conference, I was really nervous, because I was saying that me as a student amongst adults, real adults, you go to college and say, no, you're an adult now, but you guys are adults. So, having that type of connection, and I have really wonderful conversations. We're speaking to someone yesterday, said having an open dialogue and engaging with that dialogue. I think that's very important for students, because you want to have not just a business relationship, but a emotional type of relationship, like empathy. So that we want us to know that you understand what we're going through, and I feel that's very important, because we're in an unfamiliar environment. We just need that guidance and a way to our path that we can know to better our life. 'Cause I think that's the most important thing, is empathy.
As you all have been sitting here, is there something else that's just burning in your brain that you want to make sure these people know? And if not, if your brain's feeling kind of mushy, that's okay too.
Well, first thing, come to Boone. Second thing, I had a very important, interesting conversation yesterday. So I'm a big component about diversity. And I feel diversity and inclusion is something that I feel as if you got, as faculty members, should really push for. I think that our country right now currently is a fair difference for some reason. And I feel like if it's that we shouldn't look at difference as a negative thing. I think we should look at our differences as a way to learn from each other, have an open dialogue, and have a engaging conversation so that we could better each other's life. And I feel as if that we really push for inclusion. That, for example, I know a lot of kids that look like me that might have think that sitting in a panel like this is an opportunity. And if we push for that in many different areas, I think that we can have a very good environment for transfer students. And just students, the student body as general, I think that's something important we should really work for.
Amen.
I like the idea of difference, and one of the things that I think go along with difference is the difference of the resource that you're giving the student compared to what you think it's about and what it actually is. So for instance, like from my perspective, a community college is partly about transfer, but it's also an institution of its own. And it has its own degree programs and its own like focuses. So as much as I love like its ability to transfer me somewhere, I recognize that not every student is going to transfer and not every student should transfer. So as much as we want to like push the transfer thing, I figure like this is the room to like talk about it maybe, where like some students, whether it's like a non-credit or like a certificate program or even an associate's degree, like some people want to transfer and some don't, and I think that empathy thing is really good, especially at a 2-year level, just having empathy for people who aren't going to transfer, don't want to, and maybe don't need to. And the other, at my institution, they're very focused on research and internships and resources, and I think that's really awesome because it connects students with opportunities that they might not have. It's a minority-majority school. Most of the students are of, minority, and they make up the majority, which is awesome, and they're trying to connect them to economics and social mobility with all these internships. But a lot of the ones they pitch are unpaid internships and unpaid research opportunities, and they're trying to give us economic and social mobility that we maybe can't access. So there's a difference between the ideal and the real in a resource when you're trying to present it to students, whether it's an institution or it's an internship or it's research.
Sorry. First, come to Boone. I don't really have much more to add to that. Just I walked out of Rachel Kapua's presentation yesterday, and I told someone I felt like I just had a Red Bull. Like I was so energized. So just thank you to all of you here, people who you work with who couldn't be here. Obviously, we all have this great privilege of being here, but students who aren't on this panel are still represented by us, and we are all thankful for the work that you do. You don't get enough credit for it because obviously, we're kind of the oddballs on campus, but you still love us and you take good care of us, and we're really thankful for that. Thank you for dedicating all of your time and your resources to finding the kind of oddball students and making sure that we have access to the same opportunities and even greater opportunities, because, not in spite of, but because we have the transfer experience under our belt, because we're coming from these different places and we're not coming straight out of high school, and we have kids, or we just got out of the military, or whatever it is. It's exciting for us, I know all of us, to be here and to see all of that in one room with the people who are the most excited about it in the country. So yeah, it really does feel like I just had a Red Bull. Like it was just so exciting. I walked out and I was like, wow, this is so great. Yeah, and come to Boone.
Well, again, I think we've just heard from the most important voices in the room, and I really appreciate the fact that they are representing not just themselves, but the 1.6 million plus transfer students across the country. So please give them a round of applause for their time. So these 4 individuals and all those others that we just said deserve the opportunity to have that holistic and intentional just support throughout their entire journey so they can be propelled towards their goals. And we've talked a lot about different ways to do that. You've been to different sessions. You went to ones that made you feel like you were on Red Bull coming out of those, and others that have really caused you to pause and think. And so in thinking about really creating that holistic transfer student experience and achieving this requires obviously each and every one of us to work together, getting out of our silos, making sure that we're learning about one another and what happens in those offices, not just so that we can make a direct referral, but rather so we can be thinking about how to propel transfer students in all areas of our institution. So as we prepare to conclude our time together, I need you guys to do 3 things for me. Whether you do them here, whether you do them on the way to the airport, whether you're on the airplane, or if you're in the car on the ride home, I need you to think about these 3 things. First of all, I need you to continue to expand your lenses. Think about what biases you're bringing to the table. Think about your perceptions of transfer students, and think about those knowledge gaps that you have. And then go out there and seek people on your campuses or at other institutions or in other places who can help you expand your knowledge, expand your lenses, fill in those gaps, such that then you can be thinking about transfer in a more holistic way. I also want you to think about finding and accentuating your voice. Some of you are already loud and proud. about transfer. And others of you are still trying to figure out where you fit in that landscape. But I'm here to tell you, each and every single one of you can be a transfer champion on behalf of these students and the students on your campuses. That may mean that you're one-on-one working with these students as an agent. It may be that you are using your skills as a connector to make sure not only they get to the next office, but they understand why they're going to the next office, or why that research opportunity is important to their career in the future. And then maybe you're just serving as an advocate more loudly and holistically for transfer, always being that one in the room that's saying, how does this affect our transfer students? Find that voice, refine that voice, make it happen on your campuses. And finally, I really want you to carry the energy of this conference forward. Don't let this energy dissipate. Find ways to continue to go back to your campuses and let folks know what you learned today. Let folks know what it is that you can be doing collaboratively on behalf of these students here. And don't let this be the last time that NISTS hears from you this year. We want to know what you're doing. We want to be able to promote what you're doing, and we want you to help us build this wonderful cachet of knowledge that we can continue to share throughout the year. So we've spent some really awesome time together, and I'm so appreciative of everybody behind the scenes who made this work. I'm appreciative of all of you who have come together to talk transfer, and I can't wait for us to do it again, because simply we have to work together in order to make this thing work for our transfer students. And together we're going to make it simpler and more promising for your future. So we promise to work on behalf of you guys to the best of our abilities. Thank you all, and thank you all.